I'm Harper Wilson, 28 years old, and I just discovered another family reunion happened without me. There they are on Facebook, laughing, hugging, making memories I'll never be part of. When I called my mother to ask why I wasn't invited, she sighed and said those words that have haunted me my entire life. Harper, you're just too awkward and embarrassing to have around. That moment crystallized a lifetime of rejection I never deserved. Before I dive into my story, I'd love to know where you're watching from. Drop your location in the comments, hit that like button, and subscribe if you've ever felt like the black sheep of your family. Trust me, by the end of this video, you'll see how I finally stood up for myself after years of being pushed aside. The earliest memory I have of feeling different from my family was at my 5th birthday party. While other kids were running around playing games, I sat quietly in the corner, arranging my gifts in perfect order by size and color. My mother, Diana, kept trying to pull me into the chaos, whispering harshly in my ear, "Harper, stop being weird. Go play like a normal child." Even at that young age, I could feel her frustration with me. My parents were what you might call socially ambitious. Diana Wilson was the queen of hosting dinner parties and charity events in our upper-middle-class neighborhood. Everything in our home was meticulously arranged, including her children. My father, Richard, wasn't as openly concerned with appearances, but he never contradicted my mother. He was conflict avoidant to the extreme, always retreating to his home office when tensions rose. Then there was my sister, Natalie. 2 years older than me, she was everything. I wasn't confident, bubbly, socially adept. She could charm adults and make friends instantly. Mom would beam with pride watching Natalie work a room, then turn to me with that look of disappointment I grew to recognize all too well. "Why can't you be more like your sister?" became the soundtrack of my childhood. As I grew older, family gatherings became increasingly stressful. I'd be coached for days before any event. "Don't talk about your bug collection, Harper. Don't stand in the corner, Harper. For God's sake, don't do that thing with your hands when you get nervous, Harper." By age 10, I dreaded any family function. My anxiety would spike days before manifesting in stomachaches that my parents dismissed as attention-seeking. They couldn't understand that their constant corrections and disapproving glances were the very things making me more awkward, creating a vicious cycle I couldn't escape. The breaking point came during Thanksgiving when I was 12. My mother had invited her boss and his family to our celebration, making the stakes even higher than usual. I was doing my best to be invisible, speaking only when spoken to, keeping my hands still under the table. Then my cousin Jake bumped my elbow while reaching for the gravy, and disaster struck. My full plate of food tumbled onto the expensive dress of my mother's boss's wife. The room went silent. The woman was gracious, insisting it was fine, accidents happen. But my mother's face told a different story. Her eyes were ice as she helped clean up the mess, her smile tight and forced. Later that night, I overheard my parents arguing in the kitchen. "She humiliated us, Diana," my father said, his voice uncharacteristically firm. "I know," my mother replied. "Maybe we should just stop bringing her to important gatherings. She clearly can't handle herself appropriately." Isn't that a bit extreme? Is it, "You saw what happened tonight. What if she costs me my promotion? What if she ruins Natalie's reputation by association?" I crept back to my room, tears streaming down my face. I spent the next several weeks trying desperately to reinvent myself. I practiced conversations in the mirror. I read books on etiquette. I even asked Natalie to help me be more like her. My sister's advice: "Just stop being so weird, Harper. It's not that hard." When Christmas came around that year, I thought I was prepared. I had new clothes that my mother approved of. I had memorized safe conversation topics. I had practiced eating without spilling. None of it mattered. 3 days before our extended family was set to arrive, my mother sat me down. "Harper, we think it's best if you spend Christmas with Aunt Jennifer this year." Aunt Jennifer wasn't even really my aunt, just a distant family friend who lived alone and was known for taking in strays during the holidays. I spent Christmas Day watching TV while she slept off her eggnog, scrolling through photos of my family celebrating without me. I was 16 when the exclusion became official policy. A family Christmas card arrived, addressed only to my parents and Natalie. When I pointed out the omission, my mother shrugged and said, "Well, you wouldn't have enjoyed it anyway. You know how awkward these gatherings make you." That was the first time I realized they weren't protecting me from discomfort, they were protecting themselves from me. College was meant to be my escape, my chance to reinvent myself away from my family's judgmental eyes. I chose a small arts college 3 states away, and for the first time in my life I started to breathe. Among other creative, somewhat eccentric students, my awkwardness wasn't so glaring. In fact, some people found my quiet intensity and attention to detail endearing rather than embarrassing. I discovered my passion for mixed media art during my freshman year. Professor Larkin saw something in my work that no one else had ever noticed: authenticity. "Your perspective is unique, Harper," she told me after class one day. "You see things differently, and that's a gift, not a flaw." Those words were transformative. I threw myself into my art, creating pieces that explored themes of belonging, rejection, and identity. For once in my life, my sensitivity and attention to detail were strengths rather than weaknesses. I made a small group of close friends who appreciated me for who I was. I started to imagine a future where I could be myself without apology. Then summer break arrived, and I reluctantly returned home. The house looked the same, but something felt different. There were new photos on the mantel, a family barbecue I knew nothing about. My father, mother, and Natalie smiled broadly at the camera, surrounded by aunts, uncles, and cousins. The date on the digital frame showed it had happened just 2 weeks before I came home. "When was this?" I asked my mother, pointing to the photo. She barely glanced up from her magazine. "Oh, just a little get-together. Nothing formal." "Why wasn't I invited?" She sighed, setting down her magazine. "Harper, you were away at school. We didn't want to bother you with a long drive for just a casual cookout. I was only 3 hours away. You could have at least told me." "Honestly, Harper, do we need to make a big deal about this? You never enjoy these gatherings anyway. You always end up sitting by yourself or saying something inappropriate. We were just trying to have a relaxing day without complications." The word hung in the air between us. Complications. That's what I was to my family, a complication. Later that week, I ran into my Aunt Patricia at the grocery store. Unlike the rest of my family, Aunt Patricia had always been kind to me. She was my father's sister, a free spirit who never quite fit the Wilson family mold either. "Harper, I didn't know you were home," she hugged me warmly. "Got back last week," I said. Just in time to discover I missed the family barbecue. A flicker of discomfort crossed her face. "Oh, you heard about that?" "Saw the photos. Mom said they didn't want to bother me with the drive." Aunt Patricia hesitated. "Harper, I think you should know. Your sister suggested it might be better if you weren't there." "Natalie, why would she do that?" "She told everyone you were having a hard time at school and needed space. That social gatherings were triggering for you." My heart sank. "That's not true. I was doing better than ever at school." I thought it seemed off, but Diana backed her up, and you know how your mother can be. "I should have called you directly." "I'm sorry, Harper." That night I confronted Natalie in her room. "Why did you tell everyone I couldn't handle a family barbecue?" My sister barely looked up from her phone. "Oh, come on, Harper. You always ruin these things with your weirdness. Remember Thanksgiving with Mom's boss or Grandpa's birthday when you spent the entire time talking to the caterer about food preservation techniques? That was years ago, and that caterer was interesting." "Look," Natalie said, finally meeting my eyes, "Mom and Dad are finally proud of something I'm doing. I've been planning these family events and they're going perfectly. Everyone has a good time. There's no drama, no awkward moments. I'm sorry if your feelings are hurt, but I'm not going to let you ruin that." The betrayal cut deep. While I'd been away working on myself, my sister had been actively maintaining my exile. The final blow came a few days later, when I overheard my parents talking in the kitchen. I hadn't meant to eavesdrop, but I froze when I heard my name. "Diana, we should at least consider inviting Harper to the Labor Day gathering," my father was saying. "She seems different since college. More confident." "Richard, please. You know how these things go." She'll be fine for an hour, then say something strange or offensive to one of our relatives. Remember how embarrassed we were when she asked Uncle Robert about his divorce at Christmas, or when she corrected Cousin Sarah's grammar during her engagement announcement? She was younger then. It doesn't matter. I'm embarrassed to introduce her to extended family at this point. Everyone asks awkward questions about why they haven't seen her. It's easier to just keep things as they are. By pretending we only have one daughter, by protecting our family's social standing, by protecting Harper from situations she can't handle, by protecting Natalie's chance to shine without her sister's shadow hanging over her. I backed away from the door, my chest tight with pain. That night I threw myself into my art, creating a dark, fractured self-portrait that captured the pieces of me my family had rejected. It was the most honest work I'd ever created. When I returned to school in the fall, I didn't call home for 6 weeks. When I did, my mother casually mentioned that my cousin Brittany was getting married in the spring. "It's going to be quite an affair," she said. "The whole family is coming." I waited for an invitation that never came. When I checked Brittany's wedding website, I discovered I was the only family member not on the guest list. After graduation, I managed to secure a job as an assistant curator at a small but respected gallery in Portland. The position didn't pay much, but it allowed me to be surrounded by art and artists daily. My own work was evolving, becoming more confident and distinctive. A few small local shows had featured my pieces, and while I wasn't anywhere close to making a living from my art, I felt I was on the right path. My apartment was tiny but mine. My social circle was small but genuine. I was building a life that had nothing to do with the Wilson family standards or expectations. I rarely spoke to my parents or Natalie, limiting our interactions to obligatory holiday calls and the occasional email. Then, on a rainy Tuesday afternoon, my phone rang with an unexpected caller, Aunt Patricia. "Harper, sweetheart, how are you?" Her voice sounded strained. "I'm good, Aunt Patricia. Is everything okay?" A pause. "Not exactly. I've been diagnosed with stage 3 breast cancer." The news hit me like a physical blow. Aunt Patricia, with her flowing scarves and tinkling laugh, had been the one adult in my family who seemed to see me as a person rather than a problem. "I'm so sorry," I managed. "What can I do?" "Well, that's partly why I'm calling. My 50th birthday is next month, and I've decided to have a party. Nothing extravagant, just family and close friends. With everything going on, it would mean a lot to have you there." I hesitated, feeling the familiar anxiety rising. "Will everyone be there, Mom, Dad, Natalie?" "Yes, but Harper, I've already spoken to your mother. She's promised to be on her best behavior. This is important to me. I want my whole family together." Against my better judgment, I agreed to attend. Aunt Patricia was fighting cancer. How could I refuse her anything? The night of the party arrived, and I stood outside the restaurant venue for nearly 20 minutes trying to work up the courage to go inside. I'd chosen my outfit carefully, a simple black dress, nothing too artistic or unusual. I'd even pulled my naturally curly hair back into a neat ponytail, though every instinct rebelled against this attempt to look normal by Wilson family standards. When I finally walked in, the room went momentarily quiet. My mother recovered first approaching with a tight smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Harper, you made it." "How?" "Nice." My father gave me an awkward side hug. Natalie merely nodded from across the room, not bothering to approach. Aunt Patricia's greeting was the only genuine one, her hug lingering, despite how thin she'd become from her first rounds of treatment. "I'm so glad you came," she whispered. "Just be yourself. It'll be fine." For the first hour, I managed to navigate the minefield of family interactions without incident. I kept conversations brief and neutral, avoided controversial topics, and stepped outside twice to breathe when anxiety threatened to overwhelm me. Then came dinner. I was seated at a table with cousins I barely knew anymore, all of whom seemed uncomfortable with my presence. I tried to engage in conversation about their jobs and families, but each attempt fell flat. Eventually, I excused myself to get some air. As I passed a partially open door to a private dining area, I heard my name and paused. I don't know why Patricia insisted on inviting Harper, my mother was saying. She clearly doesn't fit in anymore. Did you see how she was interrogating poor Amanda about her divorce? That was Natalie's voice. So inappropriate. I felt sick. I hadn't interrogated anyone, I'd simply asked my cousin how she was doing, since I knew she'd recently separated from her husband. Diana, keep your voice down. My father ever the peacekeeper. Why should I? Everyone knows the situation with Harper. The girl has serious issues. Always has. Has she ever been diagnosed with anything? An uncle's voice. There are medications these days. We tried, believe me, my mother replied. She refused to see anyone. Classic denial. The lies stunned me. I'd never refused mental health help, it had never been offered. My parents had always insisted there was nothing wrong with me that trying harder couldn't fix. I pushed the door open, fully revealing the group my parents, Natalie, and several aunts and uncles huddled in conspiracy. Harper Aunt Patricia came forward, alarm in her eyes. We were just discussing my mental problems, I said, my voice shaking. The ones I've supposedly been in denial about my entire life. Now, Harper, don't make a scene, my mother said, her voice taking on the familiar warning tone from my childhood. I turned to Aunt Patricia, the betrayal cutting deepest from her. You promised this would be different. You said you'd talked to them. She glanced nervously at my mother. I did, but Harper, you have to understand. We're all just concerned about you. Your behavior has always been difficult. My behavior? What about their behavior? I gestured to my parents. They've been excluding me from family events for years. They've been lying about me, making up mental health issues I don't have. Harper, you're making everyone uncomfortable, my father said quietly. Good, maybe it's time you felt a fraction of the discomfort I've lived with my entire life. My voice had risen, and I could see people from the main party peering in curiously. This is exactly why we don't invite you to things, Natalie said coldly. You always end up creating drama. Aunt Patricia put her hand on my arm. Harper, maybe it would be best if you left early. You're clearly upset, and this is supposed to be a celebration. I looked into her eyes, searching for the ally I thought I had. There was nothing there but embarrassment and disappointment, the same expression I'd seen on my family's faces my entire life. Without another word, I grabbed my purse and walked out, tears blinding me as I fumbled for my car keys. On the drive home, the full weight of what had happened crashed over me. Not only had my parents continued their campaign against me, but they'd also turned even Aunt Patricia against me. The one person I thought was in my corner had invited me to her birthday, only to publicly side with my mother. I pulled over on a dark stretch of highway, unable to drive through my tears. For the first time in my life, I allowed myself to really feel the pain of my family's rejection, not as something I deserved for being different, but as the cruel, unjustified exclusion it truly was. That night I made a promise to myself I would never attend another family event again. The price was simply too high. 3 weeks after Aunt Patricia's disastrous birthday party, I was still struggling to function normally. I'd called in sick to the gallery twice, something I'd never done before. My art supplies sat untouched in the corner of my apartment. Even getting out of bed felt like an insurmountable challenge some days. Then, an unexpected message appeared on my phone from a number I didn't recognize. Harper, it's your cousin Zoe. Can we talk? It's important. Zoe was my second cousin on my father's side. 3 years younger than me, we'd never been particularly close, though I remembered her as a quiet, bookish girl who'd often observe family gatherings from the sidelines, much like I used to do. Curiosity won out over caution, and I agreed to meet her at a coffee shop halfway between our cities. Zoe had grown into a confident young woman with bright blue hair and multiple ear piercings, hardly the Wilson family aesthetic. She hugged me warmly when I arrived, then got straight to the point. I heard what happened at Aunt Patricia's party, she said, and I wanted you to know that I think it was completely messed up how they treated you. I blinked in surprise. You do. I've watched how they've treated you for years, Harper. I was too young to say anything before, and then you stopped coming around, but I've always seen it. Why are you telling me this now? Zoe stirred her coffee slowly. Because I finally stood up to my own mom last year about how controlling she is, and it made me think about you. About how your entire personality was basically criminalized by the family for no good reason. Over the next 2 hours, Zoe filled in the gaps of what I'd missed and what I'd never known. Your mom has always had this pathological need to present this perfect family image, Zoe explained. My mom says Aunt Diana was like that even as a teenager. When you came along and didn't fit that image, she just couldn't compute. What about my dad? He never defended me. Zoe's expression softened. That's the thing he did, Harper. Just never in front of you. My mom told me Uncle Richard would argue with Aunt Diana after every event about how they treated you. He'd insist they include you next time, but he always caved when Diana put her foot down. So he'd defend me in private but throw me under the bus in public. That's almost worse. I'm not excusing him, Zoe said quickly. Just telling you what I know. The whole family dynamic is toxic, honestly. Before we parted, Zoe made me promise to meet her friend Miles, a therapist who specialized in family trauma. Just one session, she pleaded. He's helped me so much, and he offers a sliding scale for payment. I was skeptical but desperate enough to try anything that might help me process the pain I'd been carrying. Miles turned out to be a gentle, insightful man in his 50s who listened more than he spoke. In our first session, he introduced me to concepts that would change how I viewed my entire childhood. What you're describing sounds like scapegoating, he explained. It's a common dynamic in dysfunctional families. One child is designated often unconsciously as the problem, while another becomes the golden child. It rarely has anything to do with the actual behavior of either child. But I was awkward, I admitted. I did say the wrong things sometimes. Harper, all children say and do awkward things. It's part of growing up. The difference is how parents respond. Healthy parents guide and support. They don't shame and exclude. Over the next few months, regular sessions with Miles helped me understand that much of my social anxiety had been created, not innate. Years of being criticized, corrected, and excluded had made me hyper-aware of every social interaction, constantly scanning for disapproval or rejection. Your mother's behavior especially shows signs of narcissistic tendencies, Miles suggested during one session. Her need for the perfect family image, her inability to accept your differences, her spreading rumors rather than acknowledging her own role in the dynamic, these are all concerning patterns. With Miles's guidance and Zoe's unwavering support, I slowly began to rebuild my sense of self. I returned to my art with a new perspective, creating a series called Family Fragments that explored the broken connections and distorted reflections of my experience. The gallery owner was impressed enough to feature 3 pieces in an upcoming show for emerging artists. It felt like the first step toward turning my pain into something meaningful. Then, 6 months after Aunt Patricia's birthday disaster, an embossed invitation arrived in my mailbox. My grandmother Ruth was turning 80, and the family was hosting a lavish celebration at her country club. "Are you going?" Zoe asked when I called her about it. "I don't know. After what happened last time." "I'll be there," she offered. "And I've been talking to some of the younger cousins. More people understand than you might think." I weighed the decision carefully, discussing it with Miles in our weekly session. "Whatever you choose, make sure it's for you," he advised. "Not out of obligation, not out of hope. They've suddenly changed, not out of fear." "What do you want, Harper?" What did I want? The question was so simple, yet so profound. No one in my family had ever asked me that. After much consideration, I decided to attend my grandmother's birthday. Not because I expected a miracle transformation in my family's behavior, but because I refused to be driven away from my own heritage. I would go on my terms as the person I truly was, not the person they wanted me to be. "I'm proud of you," Zoe said when I told her my decision. "But just so you know, I've got your back no matter what happens." For the first time in my life, I believed someone in my family actually did. I prepared for my grandmother's birthday party like a soldier preparing for battle. I chose an outfit that expressed my authentic self. A vintage-inspired dress with artistic touches, that reflected my personality without being provocatively weird by Wilson standards. I practiced responses to potential criticisms. I role-played difficult scenarios with both Zoe and Miles. Remember, Miles advised during our final session before the event, you can't control how they behave, only how you respond. Set boundaries, take breaks when you need them, and know you can leave at any time. Zoe and I arranged to arrive together, providing me with an immediate ally in what felt like enemy territory. The country club was predictably elegant, with white-gloved servers circulating champagne and hors d'oeuvres among guests dressed in country club finery. My mother spotted me immediately, her eyes widening slightly at my appearance before she composed herself. "Harper, you came." Her tone was neutral, not welcoming, but not openly hostile either. Progress, perhaps. My father seemed genuinely pleased to see me enveloping me in an awkward but heartfelt hug. "You look wonderful," he said, and for once I believed he meant it. The real surprise was my grandmother, Ruth. Unlike the distant proper woman I remembered, she embraced me warmly. "Harper, my artistic granddaughter, I've been following your gallery showings online. Your work is quite striking." I was stunned. I didn't even know you were on social media." She laughed. "I'm 80, not dead. Now come sit with me and tell me all about your life in Portland." For the next hour, the party progressed better than I could have imagined. Grandmother Ruth kept me by her side, introducing me to her friends with evident pride. Several cousins engaged me in conversation that felt genuine rather than forced. Even my father made a point of checking in, periodically bringing me fresh drinks and asking thoughtful questions about my work. Only my mother and Natalie maintained their distance, whispering together in corners while casting occasional glances my way. "This is going surprisingly well," I whispered to Zoe during a quiet moment. She frowned slightly. "Maybe too, well, I don't want to rain on your parade, but this doesn't feel like the same family from your stories." "People can change," I said, wanting desperately to believe it. The answer to the evening's unusual warmth came during dinner. My grandmother stood to make a toast, thanking everyone for celebrating with her. Then she smiled widely and announced, "And now I believe my granddaughter Natalie has a special announcement." Natalie rose gracefully, a radiant smile on her face. A tall, handsome man stood beside her, his arm around her waist. "Thank you, Grandma Ruth. As many of you know, Brandon and I have been dating for nearly 2 years now. What you don't know is that last weekend he asked me to marry him, and I said yes." The room erupted in applause. Natalie's left hand shot up, displaying a sizable diamond ring that caught the light dramatically. "I wanted to wait for today to make it official because family is so important to us. Brandon and I want to build a life with the same kind of love, support, and values that have always been the foundation of the Wilson family." Her eyes found mine across the room, a flash of something triumphant in them. "Despite having to deal with difficult family issues over the years, we've always come together when it matters most." The implication was clear to anyone who knew our history. I was the difficult family issue they'd had to overcome. As relatives swarmed Natalie and her fiancé with congratulations, I sat frozen in my seat. The entire evening suddenly made sense. I hadn't been invited because they'd had a change of heart. I'd been invited because Natalie wanted to announce her engagement with the entire family present, including the black sheep whose presence would only highlight how perfect and normal she was by comparison. Zoe squeezed my hand under the table. "You okay?" Before I could answer, my grandmother approached beaming. "Harper, come see Natalie's ring. It's my mother's setting, the one I always promised to my first granddaughter to get engaged." The second betrayal hit harder than the first. That ring had been promised to me since childhood. Grandmother Ruth had specifically told me on my 16th birthday that regardless of who married first, the family heirloom would come to me as her eldest granddaughter. It had been one of the few moments I'd felt truly valued in the family. I managed to stand on shaky legs and follow my grandmother to where Natalie held court. My sister's smile was saccharine as she extended her hand toward me. "Isn't it beautiful, Harper? Grandma gave it to Mom and Dad to hold for whichever of us got engaged first. Guess that's me." I looked at my parents standing proudly behind Natalie. "You both knew this ring was promised to me." Grandma Ruth specifically said. Now, Harper, don't start creating problems, my mother cut in smoothly. This is Natalie's special moment. But Grandma literally promised, Harper. My father's voice was low but firm. Not here. I turned to my grandmother, hoping to see recognition in her eyes, but she merely patted my arm. Don't worry, dear. We'll find something suitable for you when your time comes. Though at your age, and with your unique lifestyle, perhaps it's best the ring stays active in the family. The room seemed to tilt around me. Not only had my parents and sister engineered this entire evening to humiliate me, but they'd also managed to convince my grandmother that her promise to me had never existed. You know what? Keep the ring, I said, my voice surprisingly steady. It probably has bad energy anyway, considering how this family treats people. See, my mother hissed to those nearby. This is exactly why we can't include her in important events. She always makes everything about herself. She turned to me with cold eyes. Harper, if you can't be happy for your sister, perhaps you should go get some air. Or better yet, get some help. Diana. My grandmother looked shocked. What a thing to say. For one hopeful moment, I thought Ruth might defend me. Instead, she leaned closer and whispered, Though she's not entirely wrong, dear. Your reactions have always been concerning. Have you spoken with anyone professional about these outbursts? I looked around the circle of family members, my mother's smug expression, my father's averted eyes, Natalie's false sympathy, and my grandmother's well-meaning but devastating suggestion that the problem was my mental health, not their treatment of me. Without another word, I turned and walked away, brushing past concerned relatives and ignored calls to come back. Zoe found me in the parking lot, keys already in hand. I heard, I'm so sorry, Harper. Just get me out of here, I whispered through tears. Please. As we drove away from the country club, I felt something inside me finally shatter completely. The last fragile hope that my family might someday accept me for who I was had died tonight, killed by a calculated betrayal orchestrated by the people who were supposed to love me most. The weeks following my grandmother's birthday party were the darkest of my life. I spiraled into a depression so profound that even getting out of bed seemed pointless. My phone filled with concerned texts from Zoe and missed call notifications from Miles, but I couldn't bring myself to respond to either of them. I stopped going to work. After 3 days of no-shows, my boss at the gallery called. Harper, I've been patient because your work is excellent, but I can't keep covering your shifts. Either come in tomorrow or don't come back at all. I didn't go in. The rent on my apartment was due and I had no income. My meager savings would last another month, maybe 2 if I ate nothing but ramen noodles. Art supplies I'd once treasured gathered dust in the corner. The Family Fragments series sat unfinished, too painful to look at, too important to discard. On day 12 of my self-imposed isolation, someone pounded on my apartment door. Harper Wilson, I know you're in there. Open up or I'm calling the super to do a wellness check. Zoe. Her voice brooked no argument. I dragged myself to the door, aware of how I must look. Unwashed hair, days-old pajamas, hollow eyes. Oh, Harper. Her expression shifted from anger to concern as she took in my appearance. This is worse than I thought. She pushed past me into the apartment, grimacing at the unwashed dishes and takeout containers. Without asking permission, she opened curtains, gathered trash, and put on coffee. I've been texting you for days. Miles is worried sick. I lost my job, I said flatly. I figured as much. She handed me a mug of coffee. Drink this, then shower. We're going out. I don't want. This isn't optional, Harper. You're in a tailspin and I'm not watching you crash. Something about her tone, firm but caring, broke through the fog. I did as instructed, emerging from the shower feeling marginally more human. Zoe drove us to a small house in a quiet neighborhood I didn't recognize. A woman with silver-streaked black hair opened the door. You must be Harper. I'm Jasmine. Zoe's told me so much about you. Jasmine's my neighbor, Zoe explained, and an art therapist. I'm not really in the mood for therapy, I said warily. Jasmine smiled. Good thing I'm not offering any today. I just thought you might want to see my studio. I have a project I'm stuck on. Too tired to argue, I followed her through the house to a converted garage filled with light and color. Canvases in various states of completion leaned against the walls. The scent of paint and possibility hung in the air. This is where I hide from the world, Jasmine said, gesturing around the space. And where I find myself when I'm lost. Despite my depression, I felt a stirring of interest. Your work is beautiful. Thank you. Now, about this piece I'm stuck on. She led me to a large canvas dominated by swirling blues and grays. For the next hour, we discussed composition, color theory, and emotional resonance. I forgot my problems as I lost myself in the familiar language of art. Before I knew it, a brush was in my hand, and I was making suggestions not with words, but with paint. You have an exceptional eye, Jasmine said later, as we cleaned brushes. And real talent. Not that it matters. Can't pay rent with talent. Actually, you can. I teach workshops at the community center. One of my colleagues just moved to Chicago, leaving several private clients without an instructor. Interested. 2 days later, I taught my first private lesson to a retired surgeon who wanted to learn watercolor. The next day, I had 2 more students. By the end of the week, I had enough clients to cover my basic expenses. Jasmine became my second ally, offering not only professional connections, but genuine friendship. Her home became a sanctuary where I could create without judgment. With Zoe, Jasmine, and Miles forming a support system, I slowly began to rebuild my life. My art shifted, becoming bolder and more authentic. I started a new series called Emergence, documenting my journey towards self-acceptance. Then, 3 months after the catastrophe at my grandmother's birthday, I was scrolling through social media when a sponsored post stopped me cold. The Wilson family reunion, an extravagant week-long event at an exclusive mountain resort. The post featured photos of my extended family from previous reunions, highlighting the tradition of excellence the Wilsons had maintained for generations. According to the event page, this year's reunion would be the biggest yet, with family flying in from across the country. The comments section was filled with excited responses from cousins, aunts, and uncles I hadn't seen in years, many of whom I realized had no idea I'd been systematically excluded from family events. Curious and masochistic, I dug deeper into the event details. The reunion would cost attendees $500 per person, covering accommodations, activities, and meals. Who's paying for all this, I wondered aloud to Zoe when she came over later. Your parents, mainly, she replied, examining the page. They've been bankrolling these reunions for years. Your mom calls it her investment in family legacy or something equally pretentious. A sick feeling settled in my stomach. Do you know if they ever set up a college fund for me like they did for Natalie? Zoe's hesitation was answer enough. I spent the next day at the public library researching my parents' finances as best I could through public records. What I discovered confirmed my suspicions my parents had maintained a family event fund that had originally been earmarked as my college tuition. When I'd received a partial scholarship and taken out loans for the rest, they'd repurposed the money. My education fund had been financing family gatherings I wasn't invited to. That night alone in my apartment, I hit rock bottom and then bounced. Something inside me shifted from hurt to rage, from victim to avenger. I was done being the family scapegoat, done accepting their treatment as deserved, done hiding who I really was. With shaking hands, I opened my laptop and navigated to the application page for the Hartwell Fellowship, a prestigious program that provided artists with funding and exhibition opportunities. I'd considered applying many times, but had always talked myself out of it, hearing my mother's voice in my head. Don't embarrass yourself, Harper. You're not good enough. Not anymore. I spent the night selecting my best works, writing my artist statement, and crafting a proposal for a series examining family dynamics and resilience through mixed media installations. As dawn broke, I hit submit, then collapsed into bed. The next day, I outlined my plan to Zoe, Jasmine, and Miles, who had gathered at Jasmine's studio for what I'd called an emergency meeting. I'm going to that family reunion, I announced. Are you sure that's a good idea? Miles asked carefully. I'm not going to participate, I clarified. I'm going to confront them, all of them, with evidence. I laid out what I'd discovered about the misappropriated college fund, the systematic exclusion, and the lies that had been told about me. I've been silent for too long, letting them define who I am to the rest of the family. It's time they faced the truth, and I'm going to make sure everyone hears it. Jasmine looked concerned. This sounds like it could be traumatic for you, Harper. Probably, I admitted. But I need to do this. Not just for closure, but for justice. And then I'm done with them for good. Over the next 6 months, I prepared methodically. I underwent intensive therapy with Miles' learning techniques to manage anxiety and set boundaries. I practiced confrontation scenarios and developed contingency plans for various reactions. Jasmine helped me channel my emotions into my art, which flourished with new depth and authenticity. My Emergence series gained attention in local art circles, leading to a small but successful show at an independent gallery. Meanwhile, Zoe fed me insider information about the reunion plans and family dynamics. Through her, I learned that Natalie had been using stories about me as funny anecdotes in her increasingly popular social media posts, building her following by portraying herself as the long-suffering sister of a socially awkward mess. She never uses your name, Zoe reported, but anyone who knows your family knows exactly who she's talking about. Perfect, I said grimly. More evidence. By the time May arrived, I had compiled a comprehensive dossier on the Wilson family's treatment of me: financial records, social media posts, text messages, and emails that Zoe had helped me obtain. I'd saved enough money from teaching and art sales to cover the costs of my plan. I'd rehearsed what I would say until the words felt engraved on my heart. There was just one piece missing: a future beyond this confrontation. What would my life look like once I'd burned the bridge with my family completely? The answer came unexpectedly. While checking my email one morning, I noticed a message with the subject line, Hartwell Fellowship, Acceptance. I read it 3 times before the reality sank in. I'd been selected. The fellowship included a substantial stipend studio space in New York, mentorship with established artists, and a culminating exhibition at a respected gallery. It was everything I'd ever dreamed of, and the perfect next chapter after closing the book on my toxic family. Congratulations, Jasmine exclaimed when I called her with the news. This is huge, Harper. It feels like the universe is confirming I'm on the right path, I said, still stunned. Or maybe you're finally allowing yourself to walk the path you were meant for all along, she replied softly. The pieces were falling into place. I had support, I had evidence, I had a plan, and now I had a future waiting for me once the dust settled. 1 week before the Wilson family reunion, I made my final preparations. I booked a room at the same resort where my family would be staying. I finalized my presentation and transferred the evidence to a tablet. I picked out an outfit that represented the real me, confident, artistic, unapologetic. The night before I left for the resort, I stood in front of the mirror and made a promise to my reflection. You are not too awkward. You are not embarrassing. You are worthy of respect and love. And tomorrow you're going to make them see exactly who you really are. The 6 months leading up to the Wilson family reunion transformed me in ways I never imagined possible. Under Miles's guidance, I dived deep into the tangled roots of my family trauma. We used a combination of cognitive behavioral techniques and emotional processing to address the layers of shame and anxiety I'd accumulated over decades. Family dynamics like yours create deep neural pathways, Miles explained, during one particularly intense session. Your brain has been trained to expect rejection, to scan constantly for disapproval, to blame yourself first. We're essentially rewiring those pathways. The work was exhausting and often painful. There were sessions where I did nothing but cry, releasing years of pent-up grief for the acceptance I'd never received. There were days when I felt angry enough to burn down the world, my rage at my family's betrayal, a living thing inside me. Anger is appropriate, Miles assured me. It's a natural response to injustice. The key is channeling it productively rather than letting it consume you. Gradually, the fog of depression lifted. I began to distinguish between the critical voice in my head, which sounded suspiciously like my mother, and my authentic self. I practiced self-compassion exercises daily, learning to treat myself with the kindness I'd always craved from others. Meanwhile, my art career was gaining momentum. The local gallery that had shown my Emergence series invited me to participate in a group exhibition of promising regional artists. My private teaching practice expanded through word of mouth, with students often commenting on my unique ability to help them find their authentic creative voice. "You have a gift for seeing people as they truly are," one student told me after class. "It makes us feel safe to take risks." The irony wasn't lost on me. My family's inability to see me had somehow enhanced my ability to truly see others. Jasmine became not just a friend, but a mentor, helping me navigate the business side of an art career. We spent countless evenings in her studio discussing everything from pricing strategies to artist statements to networking in the art world. "The fellowship is going to open doors," she assured me, "but you need to be ready to walk through them confidently." Together, we refined my portfolio and online presence, creating a professional image that honored my artistic vision without compromising authenticity. When a small but reputable arts magazine requested an interview about my Emergence series, Jasmine coached me through my talking points, helping me articulate the deeper themes of identity and belonging in my work. The published interview caught the attention of several galleries in larger cities, leading to preliminary discussions about future exhibitions. For the first time in my life, I felt professionally validated, my weirdness celebrated rather than condemned. As my confidence grew, so did my social circle. Through art events and Jasmine's introductions, I developed friendships with other creative people who valued the very qualities my family had rejected. We'd gather for dinner parties where conversation flowed freely, where my observations were met with interest, rather than embarrassment, where my occasional social awkwardness was accepted as part of who I was. Small social victories accumulated, successfully navigating a networking event without anxiety attacks, delivering an artist talk to a full room without stumbling over my words, confronting a difficult client with calm assertiveness. Each success reinforced that I wasn't inherently awkward or embarrassing. I'd simply been treated as if I was for so long that I'd internalized the label. Through it all, Zoe kept me informed about family developments, serving as my eyes and ears within the Wilson circle. "Natalie's wedding planning is in full swing," she reported during one of our regular coffee meetups. "She's milking the engagement for all it's worth on social media. You should see the posts all about family tradition and Wilson values. It's nauseating." "Has she mentioned me at all?" I asked, curious despite myself. Zoe hesitated. "Not directly, but she's been doing these storytelling videos about growing up. She calls them sister stories, and they're basically thinly veiled anecdotes about you framed as comedy." Comedy, my stomach tightened. "Yeah, like..." My sister once spent an entire wedding reception talking to the caterer about food preservation techniques instead of dancing, or "My sister showed up to Easter dinner with blue hair and made my grandmother cry. She never uses your name, but everyone knows who she's talking about." The worst part is, she frames herself as this compassionate, long-suffering sister who still loves her quirky sibling despite everything. It's getting her thousands of likes. The revelation stung, but not as deeply as it once would have. She's welcome to my old stories. I'm creating new ones now. As the reunion date approached, my research into family dynamics intensified. I read books about toxic family systems, scapegoating, and narcissistic family structures. The similarities to my own experience were uncanny, validating what I'd always felt but couldn't articulate. I learned about the scapegoat role I'd been assigned, the family member designated to carry all the dysfunction, allowing everyone else to pretend they were normal. I discovered how narcissistic parents often create golden children like Natalie to validate their own self-image while projecting their disowned traits onto scapegoats. "It's not about you," Miles emphasized. It never was. You were assigned a role in a dysfunctional system before you were old enough to defend yourself. Armed with this understanding, I began planning my confrontation in earnest. I created a detailed timeline of exclusions, betrayals, and lies, compiling evidence for each incident. Zoe helped me gather screenshots, photographs, and testimonials from sympathetic family members who'd witnessed my treatment firsthand. Jasmine helped me practice my delivery, filming me as I rehearsed what I wanted to say. "You're still flinching when you mention your mother," she noted after reviewing one recording. "Your voice gets smaller." We worked on maintaining steady eye contact, speaking with authority, and managing physical responses to stress. I learned breathing techniques to keep my voice from shaking, posture adjustments to project confidence, and verbal strategies to counter potential interruptions or deflections. "Remember, they'll try to make you the problem again," Jasmine warned. "Don't let them push you back into the role of the unstable one." Financial preparations were equally important. I'd been saving diligently from my teaching and art sales, building a cushion that would support me through the fellowship's transition period. I sold several pieces from my Emergence series, carefully tracking the income for tax purposes as Jasmine had taught me. When my last outstanding student loan payment cleared, loans I'd had to take because my college fund had been repurposed for family events I wasn't invited to, I felt a symbolic chain breaking. My parents had no financial hold over me anymore. 2 weeks before the reunion, the news I'd been waiting for arrived: official confirmation of my Hartwell Fellowship acceptance, complete with contract details, move-in dates for the New York studio, and the exhibition timeline. I signed the paperwork immediately, a surge of validation washing over me as I wrote my name on the dotted line. That evening, I gathered with Zoe, Jasmine, and Miles for a small celebration dinner at Jasmine's house. As we toasted my fellowship and the impending confrontation, Miles raised an important point. "Harper, I want to make sure you're clear about what you're hoping to achieve at this reunion. What does success look like to you?" I considered the question carefully. I want them to hear the truth, really hear it. I want the extended family to know what's been happening. I want to break the silence and denial. And if they still deny everything, if they paint you as the troubled one making false accusations, then I walk away knowing I spoke my truth. Their response isn't the measure of my success. Miles nodded, satisfied. "That's exactly right. You can control your actions, not their reactions. As long as your goal isn't to change them or extract apologies, you may never get you're on solid ground." In the final days before the reunion, I fine-tuned every detail of my plan. I booked a room at the resort for the day before my family was scheduled to arrive, giving me time to familiarize myself with the layout and prepare mentally. I arranged for a rental car so I wouldn't be dependent on anyone else for transportation. I packed multiple outfits prepared for any weather or situation. The night before my departure, I stood in front of the mirror in my bedroom, studying the woman looking back at me. She bore little resemblance to the broken, defeated person who had fled my grandmother's birthday party in tears. This woman stood straight, her eyes clear, and determined, her presence grounded. "My name is Harper Wilson," I said to my reflection. "I am talented, insightful, and worthy of respect. I am not too awkward. I am not embarrassing. I am exactly who I'm supposed to be." For the first time in my life, I believed it completely. As I finished packing, my phone chimed with a text from Zoe, "Just heard from Mom. Everyone's confirmed for the reunion. The Wilson family doesn't know what's about to hit them." I smiled as I typed my response. They created an artist. Now they get to be my masterpiece. The Whispering Pines Resort lived up to its name, a luxury retreat nestled among towering evergreens in the mountains. As I pulled my rental car into the circular drive, I took a moment to appreciate the irony. After years of exclusion from family events, I was about to crash the most lavish one yet, and I'd be doing it in style. The fellowship money hadn't hit my account yet, but I'd splurged on a sleek black dress that projected exactly the image I wanted: professional, composed, and unmistakably artistic. My naturally curly hair was no longer restrained in the severe ponytail my mother had always insisted upon. Instead, it framed my face in soft waves, accented with a streak of vibrant blue, a nod to my authentic self. I'd arrived a day early, as planned, checking into my room and scoping out the resort's layout. The main events would be held in the Grand Lodge, a vaulted timber structure overlooking the lake. The Wilson family reunion had its own dedicated wing with a schedule of activities posted on an elegant sign in the lobby: welcome dinner group hikes, professional family photos, cooking classes, and the headline event, a formal banquet where my parents would give a speech about the Wilson legacy. That was where I planned to make my entrance. I spent the morning of the reunion day in meditation, grounding myself in the certainty of my worth. After a light lunch, I received a text from Zoe. They've arrived. Full Wilson circus in effect. Mom says Diana is micromanaging everything down to the napkin folds. My heart rate spiked at the confirmation that my family was now on site, but I breathed through it as Miles had taught me. This reaction was normal, my body remembering past harm and trying to protect me. I acknowledged the fear, thanked it for its concern, and gently set it aside. At 6 o'clock, I began my final preparations. I applied my makeup with care, emphasizing my eyes, always my best feature, though my mother had discouraged drawing attention to them. I slipped on the black dress, added a handcrafted necklace made by one of my artist friends, and stepped into heels that added 2 inches to my height. The woman in the mirror looked powerful. Ready? At 7:30, I made my way toward the Grand Lodge, timing my arrival for 15 minutes after the banquet was scheduled to begin. As I approached the entrance, I could hear the murmur of voices, the clink of glasses, the familiar cadence of my father's public speaking voice coming through the doors. A resort staff member stood at the entrance with a guest list. I straightened my shoulders and approached. "Good evening," I said with a confidence that surprised even me. "I'm Harper Wilson. I believe my family is expecting me." He scanned the list with a slight frown. "I don't see a Harper Wilson." "That's strange," I replied smoothly. "I'm Richard and Diana Wilson's daughter. Perhaps there was a mix-up." The staffer hesitated, then smiled politely. "No problem, Miss Wilson. Please go right in." I took a deep breath and pushed open the double doors. The scene inside was exactly what I'd expected. Round tables, elegantly set with fine china, and crystal floral centerpieces in the Wilson family colors of blue and silver. My extended family dressed in their finest attire. At the head table, my father stood at a podium mid-speech with my mother Natalie and her fiancé Brandon seated beside him. "Proud tradition of excellence that defines the Wilson family," my father was saying as heads began to turn toward the door where I stood. The ripple of recognition moved through the room like a wave. Conversations faltered. Forks paused midway to mouths. My cousin Jake actually dropped his water glass, creating a small commotion that drew even more attention to the entrance. My father's voice trailed off. As he spotted me, his expression cycling rapidly through shock, confusion, and alarm. My mother half rose from her seat, her face hardening into the cold mask I knew so well. I walked forward with measured steps, moving into the center of the room with deliberate calm. "Please don't stop on my account," I said, my voice carrying in the sudden silence. "I wouldn't want to interrupt this celebration of the Wilson family legacy." Harper, my father, managed his public persona, cracking slightly. "This is unexpected." "I imagine it is," I replied, "considering I wasn't invited." Again. My mother recovered her composure, rising fully and approaching with a tight smile fixed in place. "Harper, darling, there must have been some misunderstanding with the invitations. Perhaps we could discuss this privately." Classic Diana Wilson, always concerned with appearances, always trying to move potential scenes behind closed doors. "Actually, I think we've had enough privacy," I said firmly. "Too many private conversations where the story about me is crafted and shared without my input. I'm here because I think it's time for some transparency." Out of the corner of my eye, I saw Natalie whispering urgently to Brandon, who looked thoroughly confused by the unfolding drama. My grandmother Ruth stood from her table, leaning heavily on her cane. "Harper, what is the meaning of this intrusion?" I'm not intruding, Grandma Ruth. I'm attending a family reunion. As a Wilson, I believe that's my right. My father tried to regain control of the situation. Perhaps we could return to our scheduled program, and Harper, you and I can speak afterwards. No. The word came out stronger than I'd anticipated, silencing the room again. For 28 years, I've been pushed to the side, excluded, made to feel like there was something fundamentally wrong with me. I've been the subject of family discussions. I wasn't invited to decisions made about me without my input, and lies told about me to explain my absence. I moved toward the head table, withdrawing my tablet from my bag. I've been called too awkward and embarrassing since childhood. I've been told I'm not welcome at family gatherings. I've been portrayed as mentally unstable to explain why I'm never around. My mother's face had gone white with fury. Harper, that's quite enough. It's nowhere near enough, Mother. Let me show you what enough looks like. I connected my tablet to the presentation system that had been set up for my father's speech, and my carefully prepared slides appeared on the large screen behind the head table. The first image showed a bank statement, my supposed college fund, being systematically drained to pay for family events I'd never attended. This is what happened to the money that was meant for my education, I explained to the stunned room. While I took out student loans, my college fund was financing family reunions I wasn't invited to. I advanced to the next slide, screenshots of Natalie's sister stories' social media posts with the view and like counts highlighted. My sister has built quite a following by sharing humiliating stories about me, stories that portray me as some kind of family embarrassment while casting herself as the patient, long-suffering sister. Natalie stood up, her face flushed. Those posts aren't even about you specifically. I never use your name. You don't have to, Natalie. Everyone knows who you're talking about. Just like everyone in this room knows I've been excluded from every significant family event for years. I continued through my presentation, methodically displaying evidence of each major exclusion and betrayal: the text messages between my parents discussing whether to invite me to events, the emails where my mother spread rumors about my supposed mental health issues, the social media posts showing family gatherings I'd never known about. As I spoke, I watched the faces of my extended family. Some showed shock and confusion. Others displayed discomfort or guilt. A few, particularly the younger cousins, looked angry on my behalf. When I reached the slide about my grandmother's ring, the one promised to me but given to Natalie, Ruth sank back into her chair, her expression troubled. Throughout my presentation, my mother made several attempts to interrupt, but each time I continued speaking with calm determination. My father stood frozen at the podium, his public persona completely shattered. Finally, I reached the last slide, my Hartwell Fellowship acceptance letter. While you've all been gathering without me, I've been building a life of my own. Next month, I'll be moving to New York to begin the Hartwell Fellowship for Emerging Artists. My work exploring family dynamics and identity will be featured in a major gallery exhibition next spring. I turned to face my parents directly. I'm not here to ask for your approval anymore. I'm not here to beg for inclusion in a family that never wanted me. I'm here to speak the truth that has been denied for too long, and to let you all know that despite your best efforts to convince me otherwise, there is nothing wrong with me. There never was. The silence that followed was profound. Then, unexpectedly, my father stepped away from the podium and approached me. "Harper," he said quietly, "I don't know what to say except, you're right." My mother gasped. "Richard." He turned to her with uncharacteristic firmness. "No, Diana. Enough. Our daughter is right. We've treated her abominably for years. I've stood by while you excluded her, spread rumors about her, turned family against her. I've been a coward and I'm ashamed." The public acknowledgement I'd never expected to receive rendered me momentarily speechless. My father turned to address the gathered family. "What Harper has shown you tonight is true. Diana and I have systematically excluded our eldest daughter from family events, using her supposed awkwardness as justification. The truth is, Harper has always marched to her own drummer. She's creative, insightful, and yes, sometimes socially unconventional, but those differences should have been celebrated, not punished. My mother's face had gone from white to red. Richard, stop this immediately. You're making a scene. No, Diana. You've been making a scene for 28 years, carefully orchestrating this false image of a perfect family while cutting out anyone who didn't fit your narrow definition of acceptable. Several relatives were nodding now. My Aunt Patricia, who had betrayed me at her birthday party, looked particularly uncomfortable. I knew something wasn't right, my cousin Marcus said from his table. Every time I asked about Harper, I got vague answers about her being unable to attend or choosing not to come. I should have reached out directly. I'm sorry, Harper. Others began to speak up as well, relatives admitting they'd noticed my absence but had accepted the explanations they'd been given, cousins recalling how I'd been treated differently at gatherings, aunts and uncles expressed shock at the systematic nature of my exclusion. My mother, seeing control of her carefully constructed narrative slipping away, made one last desperate attempt to regain the upper hand. I have personally paid for everyone's stay at this resort, she announced loudly. I've funded every family reunion for the past decade. If you're all so concerned about Harper's feelings, perhaps you'd prefer to reimburse me and leave. The naked threat hung in the air for a moment before my grandmother Ruth stood again. Diana, she said firmly, that's quite enough. I raised you better than this. Mother, you don't understand. I understand perfectly well. I've been complicit in this too, allowing myself to be manipulated into believing Harper was the problem. She turned to me, her eyes sad but clear. The ring should have been yours, Harper. I remember my promise. I let them convince me you wouldn't want it, that it would be better used by Natalie. I was wrong and I'm sorry. One by one, relatives began to approach me, offering apologies, expressing dismay at what they'd learned, sharing their own memories of times they'd seen me treated unfairly. Some were sincere, others clearly motivated more by social pressure than genuine remorse. I accepted each interaction with the same calm dignity, neither seeking validation nor rejecting genuine connection. As the formal structure of the evening disintegrated into clusters of agitated conversation, I gathered my things and prepared to leave. I'd said what I came to say. The truth was out. Whatever happened next was up to them. My father caught me at the door. Harper, please don't go yet. We need to talk. We've had years to talk, Dad. You chose silence every time. I know, and I was wrong. Please give me a chance to make amends. I studied his face, seeing genuine regret there. I'm not interested in quick apologies or dramatic promises. Real amends take time and consistent action. I'll be in town until tomorrow afternoon if you want to have an actual conversation. As I walked out of the Grand Lodge into the cool evening air, I felt lighter than I had in years. Behind me, I could hear the raised voices of my family arguing amongst themselves, the carefully constructed facade of Wilson family perfection finally cracking apart. I had spoken my truth. I had been heard. Whatever happened next, I would face it as my authentic self, not as the distorted reflection my family had tried to make me believe I was. The night sky above was brilliant with stars, and for the first time in my life, I felt I had the right to claim my place under them. 1 year later, I stood in the center of the Hartwell Gallery in New York, surrounded by my work and the buzz of opening night conversation. My exhibition, Family Systems, had drawn an impressive crowd, art critics, collectors, fellow artists, and curious members of the public, drawn by the advance reviews that had called my work powerfully authentic and emotionally resonant. The journey to this moment had been intense and transformative. Moving to New York with the Hartwell Fellowship had given me the fresh start I needed after the confrontation at the Wilson family reunion. The city's energy matched my newly empowered spirit, fast-paced, unapologetic, vibrant with possibility. My studio in the fellowship building became my sanctuary, a place where I could pour all my experiences and emotions into my art without judgment or restraint. Working alongside other fellows created a community of creative support I'd never experienced before, people who challenged me artistically while accepting me personally. My mentor, renowned installation artist Elena Vasquez, pushed me to go deeper with my work to transform personal pain into universal themes that could connect with viewers from all backgrounds. Your story is the doorway, not the destination, she told me during one of our sessions. Use it to invite people into their own reflections on belonging, rejection, and authenticity. Under her guidance, family systems evolved from simple two-dimensional pieces to immersive installations that invited viewers to physically engage with concepts of inclusion and exclusion. The centerpiece was a room divided by transparent barriers arranged so that visitors would unexpectedly find themselves separated from their companions, experiencing moments of isolation they hadn't anticipated. Critics had responded enthusiastically, with the New York Arts Review calling it a visceral exploration of family dynamics that transforms personal trauma into collective catharsis. Sales had been strong enough that I was already fielding inquiries about my next exhibition. As I greeted guests and answered questions about my work, I caught sight of familiar faces entering the gallery. Zoe, Jasmine, and Miles had flown in from the West Coast for my opening night, just as they'd promised. Harper Zoe rushed forward to embrace me. "This is incredible. I'm so proud of you." Jasmine circled me with an appraising eye. "Look at you. New York has been good for you. You're glowing." Miles smiled warmly. "The work is exceptional, Harper. You've transformed your experience into something truly powerful." "I couldn't have done it without the three of you," I said sincerely. "You believed in me when I couldn't believe in myself." They had become my chosen family, the support system I'd created when my biological family had failed me. We stayed in constant contact despite the distance, with weekly video calls and daily text exchanges. Their unwavering support had been my foundation as I built this new life. As I gave them a personal tour of the exhibition, pointing out details and sharing the stories behind certain pieces, I noticed an unexpected figure hovering near the entrance, my Aunt Patricia, looking tentative and out of place in the stylish New York crowd. "Excuse me a moment," I said to my friends, making my way toward her. She looked different than the last time I'd seen her. Her cancer was in remission, but the experience had aged her. The confident, scarved bohemian of my childhood had been replaced by a more subdued woman, her formerly dark hair now completely silver. "Aunt Patricia," I said, neither warm nor cold. "I'm surprised to see you here." "Harper." She twisted her hands nervously. "Your exhibition was mentioned in the Boston Globe. I wanted to see your work. To see you. It's a long way to come just for an art show." "I didn't come just for the art. I came to apologize. Properly, in person." She glanced around at the crowded gallery. Though I realized this might not be the best time. I studied her face, searching for sincerity. "There's a quiet corner by the installation in the back. We can talk there." As we moved through the gallery, I noticed her stopping to really look at my pieces, her expression growing more troubled with each one. "Your work is powerful," she said when we reached the quiet corner. "I had no idea the depth of what you were experiencing." "That was by design, wasn't it? The family policy was to pretend I didn't exist rather than acknowledge the reality." She winced. "Yes, and I participated in that, even when I knew better." She took a deep breath. "My cancer is in remission now, but facing mortality has a way of clarifying what matters. I was wrong, Harper. At my birthday party, at every family event where I didn't speak up for you in all the years, I let Diana dictate how you should be treated. I was a coward, and I'm deeply sorry." The apology was unexpected. In the years since the confrontation, I'd received awkward overtures from various family members, holiday cards, social media friend requests, vague messages about reconnecting. Most seemed motivated more by curiosity or social obligation than genuine remorse. Patricia's apology felt different. "What happened after I left the reunion?" I asked, genuinely curious. "Chaos," Patricia said with a rueful smile. "The family basically imploded. Richard and Diana had a very public argument that continued back at their hotel room. They separated 2 months later. This was news to me. They separated. Are they divorcing?" "Not yet, but Richard moved out. He's been seeing a therapist, apparently. She hesitated. He talks about you, you know. He showed me articles about your fellowship. I think he's genuinely proud of you in his way. I absorbed this information without comment. Natalie's social media empire took a hit, Patricia continued. After you exposed her sister's stories for what they really were, she lost quite a few followers. The wedding got postponed, though I think that had more to do with Brandon finally seeing the real Natalie than with the family drama. And how about you, I asked. Besides the cancer, I've been doing a lot of thinking about my own life choices. About why I always deferred to Diana despite knowing she was wrong. About why I never had the courage to live authentically. She gestured to my artwork. Unlike you. We talked for nearly an hour, Patricia filling me in on family developments while I shared carefully selected details about my new life. Several relatives had reached out to her about contacting me, she explained, but she'd refused to act as intermediary without my permission. I won't make the same mistake twice, Harper. Your boundaries are yours to set. As our conversation drew to a close, she asked the question I'd been expecting. Would you consider reconnecting with any of the family? Not Diana necessarily, but Richard has changed. And some of the cousins genuinely miss you. I'd given this possibility a lot of thought over the past year. With the distance provided by both geography and time, I'd been able to distinguish between those family members who had actively participated in my exclusion and those who had simply followed the established pattern with questioning it. I'm open to limited contact, I said finally. On my terms. No big family gatherings, no pretending the past didn't happen. One-on-one interactions only, at least to start. Patricia nodded, understanding the boundaries. That's more than fair. After she left, promising to respect whatever parameters I set for future communication, I rejoined my friends who had been watching the interaction from a distance. Was that who I think it was? Zoe asked. Yes. Aunt Patricia. She came to apologize. And Jasmine raised an eyebrow. And I listened. It was unexpectedly healing. Miles smiled approvingly. That's significant progress, Harper. Being able to hear an apology without either rejecting it outright or immediately granting forgiveness shows real emotional maturity. The remainder of the evening passed in a blur of conversations, congratulations, and the surreal experience of hearing strangers discuss the meaning and impact of my work. By the time the gallery closed, I was exhausted but exhilarated. Back in my apartment, I kicked off my heels and collapsed onto the couch with Zoe, Jasmine, and Miles, all of whom were staying with me during their visit. I still can't believe this is my life, I admitted. A year ago, I was having a breakdown after being humiliated at my grandmother's birthday party. Now I have a successful exhibition, a fellowship, and actual career prospects in the art world. You created this reality, Jasmine reminded me. Your talent and courage made it happen. With a little help from your friends, Zoe added with a grin. More than a little, I acknowledged. You three saw me when no one else did. You helped me see myself. The conversation turned reflective as we discussed the unexpected outcomes of my confrontation at the family reunion, my parents' separation, Natalie's damaged reputation, the various family members who had reached out individually to apologize or reconnect. The most surprising thing, I mused, is how much more comfortable I am in social situations now. Without them constantly undermining me and pointing out every supposed misstep, I'm actually pretty good with people. It was true. The gallery opening had required me to engage with dozens of strangers, answer challenging questions about my work, and maintain a professional demeanor under pressure, all things that would have terrified me a year ago. Yet I'd navigated the evening with confidence and even enjoyment. That's because social anxiety isn't who you are, Miles pointed out. It was a response to being consistently invalidated. Remove the source of invalidation, add supportive relationships, and the anxiety naturally decreases. The next morning, as we shared breakfast before my friends headed to the airport, my phone chimed with an email notification. It was from my cousin Zoe's mother, an invitation to a family gathering celebrating my grandmother Ruth's 81st birthday. I showed the message to my friends, mixed emotions playing across my face. "Are you going to go?" Zoe asked cautiously. I considered the question, remembering the humiliation of Ruth's 80th birthday when Natalie had announced her engagement and claimed my promised ring. A year ago, such an invitation would have triggered either desperate hope or defensive rejection. Now I felt neither. Just a calm certainty in my own worth and the clear-eyed ability to choose what was best for me. "I don't know yet," I answered honestly. And that's the difference. It's actually my choice now. I can decide based on what feels right for me, not out of obligation or fear or desperate hope for acceptance. That, Miles said with quiet pride, is what true healing looks like. As my friends prepared to leave, we stood in the morning sunlight streaming through my apartment windows, the New York skyline, creating a dramatic backdrop to our goodbye hugs. "So what's next for the extraordinary Harper Wilson?" Jasmine asked. I smiled, feeling the limitless possibility of the future stretching before me. "I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be, creating the life I want, surrounded by people who see me for who I truly am. The rest will unfold as it should." And that perhaps was the deepest lesson of my journey, that my worth was never dependent on my family's recognition, that authenticity would always be more powerful than conformity, and that creating my own path would lead to places far more beautiful than any I could have reached by following someone else's map. So what about you? Have you ever been the black sheep of your family or felt excluded because you were different in some way? How did you handle it? Share your experiences in the comments below. And if this story resonated with you, please like, subscribe, and share it with someone who might need to hear that being different isn't something to apologize for. It might just be your greatest strength. Thank you for joining me on this journey. And remember, the family that truly matters is the one that loves you exactly as you are.